Welcome, residents, to the Dr. DC podcast. My name is producer Richard, and next to me is the Doctor himself.
Hello.
Each week, we talk about the weird and wonderful world of DC while fielding questions from listeners like you. Today, we are joined by one of the most prolific comic book artists working today. You may recognize some of his recent work with Grant Morrison on Green Lantern or a litany of other important works over the decades. Welcome, Liam Sharp.
Thank you, gents. Very, very happy to be here. And thanks to everyone who voted to have me on. Amazing.
Yeah. I mean, it was pretty decisive too.
Yeah.
The vote. We had names up there. Liam Sharp came in real strong.
Well, that's amazing. So yeah, I couldn't say no. And it's a pleasure. Thank you.
Well, we're like we just said before we started recording, we're so thrilled to have you here.
And we appreciate Bruno for pressuring you.
Thank you, Bruno, for applying sufficient transatlantic pressure.
Yeah, my good friends in Dublin, they're looking out for me and also applying pressure on me too. So it was a must do.
For the people at home who probably have seen your work, probably love your work, but don't necessarily know the journey. Can you talk a little bit about how you break in as an artist and a creator in comics? Like what was your personal journey to that career?
You know, the thing with that is that there's no two stories that are the same.
Right.
It changes all the time, and obviously it changes decade to decade as well, because the ways in, you know, it's basically whenever a door opens, you just slam a foot in it and squeeze your way through, because you just don't know when those doors will open. The reality is that there's only so many titles, particularly in the mainstream, that anyone can draw. You know, often with the maiden characters, even with the big characters, there might only be 2 or 3 books, and obviously everyone's clamoring to get on those books, so it's really tough. But for me, it goes back a long time. I've been doing this 35 years, which is a horrifying long amount of time. You know, I definitely don't feel like I'm old enough to have, how can I have been doing this job for longer than I've been alive? That's what I can't understand.
You're doing it as long as I've been alive. That's the exact age I am. So,
right. So I was lucky. I was in. I should go back a little bit further. Actually, I'm one of those. I'm from a working class Midland English town called Derby, which is very much a sort of industrial heartland, and it's where the first factory in Europe during the Industrial Revolution was, and it's the home to Rolls-Royce, where they make the aeroplane engine. So it's got this very sort of, gritty. I always say it's a city without an ego, because people are always like, "Whoa, why would you want to live here?" And you're going to get out of this place, and it's actually a great place,
right?
But when I was growing up, there was certainly no avenues for artists, and it became very apparent that I was an artist sort of very young. So my dad, who was also could have been an artist but ended up an engineer, he was always like, well, if my son's going to be an artist and he wants to be an artist, I'm going to support that. My teachers were always like, you've got to do something with this kid. And then there was just a bunch of happenstance where what happened was one of the teachers said, look, take him to the Gifted Children Society, which is like preposterously named, pretentious. No pressure there.
Yeah, right.
It's where you give away children, right? That's you gift some child.
So anyway, basically, I ended up there, and the guy who was in charge of it at that time had been the headmaster of this place down in Eastbourne, which is in the south of England, which was a private school. Borders, and it was basically like Hogwarts for me, so I was very much Harry Potter.
Makes sense.
And they'd never had an art scholarship in one of those schools, and so he suggested they They looked at my work. They took me into literally another room and made me draw just to check that it was actually my art.
Oh, jeez.
And, it's all that kind of thing. But anyway,
10 etchings or you're getting a whip.
Right.
Exactly. That's wild. Like forensically, like looking at your signature and stuff like that.
Putting them side by side. Yeah.
Well, that had happened in an art competition in Derby when I was a kid. It's like they said, "No, you've not done this. Your dad did it. You're not.
Oh my
you're
God.
not entering the competition." So they kicked me out of it.
You know what? One time I used a combination of crayon and pencil crayon, and they definitely tested my my skills there. They were like, 2 forms of media. I don't think so.
That's no. Honestly, what kind of genius?
You know what? I mean, some of us are just born with it.
Well, there you go. So you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. Totally.
But I know that I realize this is a very long-winded story, so I'll try and bring it to a quicker conclusion. But basically what happened was when I was in that school, one of my total heroes, a guy called Don Lawrence, who did a comic called The Trigon Empire, which was in a weekly kids magazine. Beautiful, beautiful painted science fiction fantasy stuff. I adored it. And he became very famous in Europe doing a strip called Storm. Anyway, he was just outside of Eastbourne, and through a friend of a friend, I found out that he was looking for an assistant. I couldn't believe it. He was there, so I met him, and he loved my work. So basically, instead of going to college, I went straight out of school at 18 to assist him for a year. And after me, actually, Chris Weston did the same.
Wow.
And from that, I went to 2000 AD. Don was great in that initially what he was doing was training me to take over Storm from him. But in the process of me being there, he realized that he wasn't ready to stop. And
Right.
Also I realized that I didn't want to be just a clone of Don Lawrence,
Right. Yeah.
So he really helped me. He became a great friend. I did actually go back and work with him on his last book, but he helped me get contact to 2000 AD. 2000 AD gave me work. That led eventually to Marvel UK, where I did Death's Head. That was a huge breakout for me into the American market in 91. And, it's been ups and downs since then. It's an up and down kind of an industry. So you have moments when you're seen and moments when you're not so seen, and you just have to kind of navigate that.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know who it was that had said it on our podcast, but one of the comic book creators we had on here once said that, basically the way that the comic book industry works is that if you find a door open for you, typically it's walled behind you. So
Yes.
Yeah.
That's true.
That's right. I don't remember who said that, but yeah, everyone finds one way to break in.
and then that's that way doesn't exist after that.
Yeah, exactly.
No, it doesn't. It's so true. It's so true. And so it does. It becomes an impossible answer. You can't tell anyone how to do it. But the best advice, though, is still. I mean, nowadays it's different because you can publish your own stuff.
Of course.
Right.
But I always say, try not to fixate on a single character that you really want to do.
Right.
Love it more than you love drawing what you think you love drawing. If that makes sense. You've got to love the medium more than the characters. You've got to love telling stories more than you love, say, Batman or Spider-Man or whatever.
Well, and I think there's something unique too that I've noticed about your work is that you don't necessarily there is definitely some a Liam Sharp style, and I can see it transferred between stories. But there's also you have these ability to drastically change the art forms that you're working with. I'm looking between that Batman book that you had shown me,
Batman Wonder Woman,
Wonder Woman, and then I look at that other Batman book, the Reptilian, and it's the art styles are drastically different to me, and it's just, you don't really see that often, I don't think.
Well, it's funny. That's one of the things I've been sort of talking about a little bit more recently, because it seems I get that the industry wants you to maintain a style. And even this happened with my daughter. She went to the Academy of Art in San Francisco. Mm-hmm. And when she finished, which is only a year ago, they have these portfolio reviews by agencies. And one of the agency basically said, refine a single style and stick to it so that it's recognizable. But that doesn't seem like art to me.
Right.
It just doesn't seem like, art seems to be an exploratory medium where you want to continue to progress and try different things and learn and grow and sort of, there's another side to it too. Every script you get has an entirely different vibe.
Yeah.
You know, so I think that when I'm hired to do a job, my first question to myself is how do I feel when I'm reading the script? What kind of images am I seeing in my head? And I've never seen the exact same look or feel in my mind for every script that, you know, that would require me to just have the same approach. So, you know, when I did the Brave and the Bold, that Batman story was, it had, obviously, there was the carry on from Wonder Woman, and I saw it very much as a sort of sequel from that.
Right.
But I also was thinking, okay, what are all the great fantasy artists that I loved growing up? So Barry Windsor Smith, and, you know, the Jim Fitzpatrick, who wrote the foreword to the book, and he did a bunch of Irish mythological books that had sort of roots in Barry Smith type style art. Brilliant books. So it was all of those kind of approaches that informed that book. But then when it came to working with Garth, who I've known forever and ever, we were talking about it, and he was just saying about, okay, well, Batman for him was, what he remembered was like Arkham Asylum and the Dark Knight that Miller had done, and both of us really fell in love with our version of Batman in that era. And so it was, for me, it was like, I want to get that mood. And he was like, great, that's where this is jumping off from. Let's imagine that it's straight out of that period and just take it from there. And so, yeah, it has got a kind of Arkham Asylum vibe as if it's in that universe, which was a lot of fun.
I love that. I mean, definitely like Reptilian. I love like just how panels almost seem to just fade into shadow and stuff like that. I love that. I will say the Brave and the Bold, there's moments in there, especially, you know, where there's gates and ornate stuff, and we're kind of in like Tir na Nog and stuff like that. And it made me think of, I don't know the artist, but in my house growing up, we had this like old school artist's rendering of like the Lord of the Rings, and had like a little Gollum in the corner in his boat, and had Gandalf in that, and it made me think of that kind of like high fantasy sort of thing. I got a feeling I might have had that poster. Was that the one that had like a stone arch? Yeah, exactly.
I remember that poster.
It was like hung up. It was hung up in our basement growing up. I love that thing. I don't know where it is now. I hope it still exists somewhere.
I can't remember the name of the artist.
Oh my god!
But yeah, no, I remember that poster very vividly, and I see exactly what you mean. Probably subconsciously, it was informing the whole book. So there you go. You just hit on the actual source.
That's hilarious.
Holy shit!
I mean,
incredible.
not to completely undercut or undo all of the great stuff that you just said, but I'm a little bit curious, as you were getting deeper and deeper and more implicated in the world of comics, you know, from 2000 AD and Marvel UK and all that stuff, did you have a moment where you kind of cast your mind forward and you were like, there's a character I really want to work on? Like, even if you had to shelve it and like remind yourself that that's not the thing, like, did you have a moment like that where you're like, I'm working in this industry now, I really hope I get a crack at X character?
Honestly, I've been so lucky. I think the only one that that I always dreamt of drawing that I still haven't really got to draw in terms of comic anyway, was Conan, but I guess he's not really a comic character, you know, essentially.
Conan would be awesome.
You'd be perfect for that. Jeez. Yeah, I mean, so much, especially that Brave and the Bold reminds me of those, like, there's like that's like 70s like side of the van like fantasy stuff that I love.
I love that. I'd pay pretty good money for a Liam Sharp like Warlord series.
Oh yeah.
Well, that was the oh no, I'm thinking Warlock actually, because I loved Warlock, and he's another one that I've never drawn.
Right.
But yeah, Warlock, God, that stuff is insane. I did actually pitch that a few years ago, but there was so much going on.
Wild.
That's incredible. Well, we've got a ton of questions.
Yeah, we got questions from our listeners.
For our theme, Liam Sharp.
Our theme is Liam Sharp. What a coincidence that we got Liam in for this one.
Oh, I didn't even get that. That makes sense. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Well, I shall try and keep my answers a little briefer.
Oh my God.
Oh,
You're on the wrong podcast if you want to be brief.
Okay.
our listeners will be so grateful that there's less of us talking.
Yes.
Okay.
We're definitely a long-winded podcast. All right, well, let's go to our first platform. We're going over to Twitter.
That's Twitter.
That's right. First question comes from Adam Talking Superman on Twitter, who asks, Sharp is a constantly evolving artist pushing himself to different techniques. Please ask if he wishes or feels he would have done any earlier work differently if he could have. Would underrated masterpiece Superman, Where Is Thy Sting look different if done today?
I mean, this is a tough question for artists, because I think like writers, artists, everyone looks back on their work and goes like, if I knew what I knew now.
Liam's like, no, it was perfect.
What do you feel looking back on that, on Superman, Where Is Thy Sting or something like that? What do you think you've learned or picked up since then?
It's interesting. I actually posted about this quite recently because I've been doing this Kickstarter, and it's afforded me an opportunity to look back at sort of 35 years of work, and it's shown me where I've kind of got brave and taken moments where I would get bold with my art and really push myself, sometimes a little bit too far. and then sometimes I then wouldn't get any work, and I'd panic, and I'd pull it right back and be super mainstream again.
Right.
And then, take baby steps forward to back into something a bit more sort of extreme. What I've realized subsequently is that I love both ends of it so much that it really does depend on the story. And I know that, a certain story is going to require me to do something much more mainstream and consistent. And other stories are going to give me, like the Green Lantern, sort of the opportunity to draw in lots of different styles because it's appropriate to the bigger story. There's a reason behind it. In terms of that story, I think that it's a mix that has both of those elements, but I also think that I was probably pushing myself technically without really thinking enough about the consistency of the story. So although I'm really proud of little bits of it here and there, I don't think it hangs together as well as I would like it to now. I'd want it to have more cohesion. So yes, it would definitely be different. But, I love working with the artists, and we're talking about doing something again. We haven't done anything for a long, long time. So I think we'll probably just figure out some creator-owned project and, do that in the next 2-3 years, which is great. But he's brilliant because he allows that. He gives me room to do that kind of thing. And the same with Grant. Both of those two are particularly great at giving me space and reason to explore, and it worked within the theme of the story.
I mean, that's an interesting thought even in itself, because I think that one of the things that I noticed just from looking at your work is you're able to like open up and do some really creative things when it makes sense, but also like hold yourself back and like work within confines if it makes sense for the story as well, which is like some artists will see they'll go crazy for stuff that like does not make sense sometimes, right?
It does seem like a very like uncommon level of like willpower to like understand when to like rein yourself in instead of like constantly cracking home runs. Be like, sometimes you gotta bunt, sometimes you gotta like for the team,
Maybe he would have gotten a ring.
Yeah.
I think some of it is just being older, literally it's about being older and about thinking about the reasons why you might want to do it and does it serve the story. And I think as I've got older, it's like that. When you're young, you're very gung-ho and you want to push all the walls down and break barriers and, and really, really sort of establish yourself, I think, as somebody who's sort of trying to, make a difference or grow. But it doesn't always work. It doesn't always work with the stories, basically what I was saying earlier. So as I've got older, everything I try to do is in service of the story. And because it is it's a collaborative thing. If you're not working as a team, then the thing will tend to fall apart. If you're trying to showboat, then that's not that's not in service of the story. That's in service of yourself, really, as an artist. And you might not be meaning to do that. It's not like it's always conscious. I think when you're young, you're just you're sort of chomping at the bit, and you're trying to grow, and it doesn't always work.
It's a confident move as an artist to to not do everything when you have the ability to.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah.
All right, let's go to the next question.
Sure.
From William Blake, who asks, who has been Liam's favorite comic publisher to work with? Careful. No.
I know that's always kind of like a tricky question for people, but I mean, just generally,
I grew up a Marvel kid. But when I was in England, and again, you don't always know the reasons why, but we would get the kind of dregs of American comics into England that would be shipped in, and then they'd be sort of scattered across the island. And I guess the further north they went, the thinner and thinner the source got.
Right.
And you never could follow a full series. And for whatever reason, the shop that was over the road for the little newsagent tended to just get Marvel and not DC. So I never really saw much DC growing up. And as a result, I became very much I loved the Hulk, and I loved anything actually. One of the earliest comics I remember was a Gene Colan Daredevil that was actually from a year before I was born. So I think my uncle might have brought it in.
Wow.
But yeah, Fantastic Four, the Hulk was particularly a favorite. I still have a giant Treasury Hulk edition that I absolutely adore.
That's awesome.
From when I was a kid. And so, for that reason, I grew up being a Marvel fan, and I started out at Marvel. But for whatever reason, DC started to give me more work around about 2000. And for the last 20 years, they have been my main employer, except for the time I took out to sort of work at Madefire. So I have to say, DC, in terms of the way the editorial are and working with them, it's just been the best experience. The editors are fantastic. They've been so sort of supportive in, especially given that they've let me do the things that I've done in the last few years and grow like that on mainstream books. Yeah, I mean, to be given the freedom to do what I did on the Green Lantern was amazing, and very sort of trusting. So I have an extremely good relationship with the editorial at DC. I've really loved it. And Marvel UK was great, but Marvel UK was a whole different bag. With Death Said, that was we were all in. It was like a club. But obviously, I met my wife there, so my whole life, my kids had came from Marvel UK.
Right.
We kind of had a bullpen there, so a lot of us came from all over the country. There's Brian Hitch in there. There's Andy Lanning in there. There's Dan Abnett in there. There was astonishing Richard Dolan, who went and ended up working in New Zealand on the Lord of the Rings movies. Incredible talent in that room, and we had just a couple of years where whatever we came up with was like entertained by Paul Neary. He was the editor in chief, and he just listened to us, and he let us come up with ideas, and he let us design the characters. So I designed Death Set 2, and that thing took off crazily. So, in that sense, I've never felt since that I had as much a part of being, part of the company as I was back then. That was impossible to replicate, I think.
Yeah.
That was magical. But yeah, I mean, being back with DC the last 5 years has been amazing. I have no complaints at all. I'm very happy.
That's awesome.
I mean, the way like your art actually does it, I mean, maybe I'm being like too much of a DC stan here, but like it does feel like your artwork belongs in DC. Like it's such like it makes so much sense, I think, for the characters there and stuff. So
it's I mean, at the very least, it does seem like what Liam was saying about make the art match and serve the story. That seems to all have been like knocked out of the park for Wonder Woman and Brave and the Bold
yeah, it's such a
Green
perfect
Lantern
match, I think. Yeah.
It's funny, isn't it? It's like when I look back and I think about DC and Marvel at the like in the 80s, it always seemed like Marvel's got the, I'm sorry to say this, but for me, I felt like they were the superhero comics that I really loved. I loved what was happening in the X-Men. I loved the Fantastic Four, I loved the Thing,
great books,
Hulk and all of that. Great characters. But they didn't do trades and intelligent writing and, the really groundbreaking stuff in the same way that DC were. So I didn't have the same connection with the DC characters because I wasn't growing up with them for sure. Mainly because of that. But then when I came across The Dark Knight and when I came across Arkham Asylum and when I came across those books, it was just, Ronin, Frank Miller's Ronin.
Yeah.
Wow. What they were putting out. And obviously you've got what Alan Moore was doing, Swamp Thing as well. And, there was so much intelligent writing going on. And then the way that evolved. So, you had all of that, the line of creator-owned books that they did at Vertigo, which again were just changed everything. So it seemed to be where the brains were.
Yeah.
DC.
You working on Swamp Thing, that would be that just passed through my head now.
This is just us. This is just us lining up pitches.
Yeah.
In a weird way, although it wasn't Swamp Thing, I think that when DeMatteis wrote Man-Thing, when I was drawing that it was one of the times that character had the same Vertigo-esque depth and quality. So I sort of really feel like I did draw that, given that the character was invented at the same weekend in the same flat and taken to two different companies.
Wait, are those characters similar?
Yeah, exactly.
But I also quite like the fact that the Man-Thing looks a little bit like the Snuffleupagus from Sesame Street.
That's amazing. I love that. That's really good. Also, I think we are part of North America, but I think like where we are actually podcasting out of, I think we can definitely appreciate the like lack of access because we live basically one of the most remote places in Canada, and so like we get like the like either just like the most popular possible stuff, or we get like the like dregs of it for sure.
Well, you special order stuff. Yeah. I couldn't imagine growing up like here in the 70s or 80s or 90s and try and get your hands on comics.
No, your comic book
it's a lot easier now. The
wood.
network of delivery and stuff like that's a lot better now. But yeah, that would have been tough.
Yeah, for sure. All right, let's get to the next question.
Let's do it.
Next question comes from Alexander the Alex, who asks, "Hey Liam, which characters / creators got you into comics? Also, congrats on getting all of this exposure with Canadian Podcast Award winners. I'm sure you will do wonders for your career." Also, I love the Green Lantern. Thanks, Alex. Who got you? What creators and what creators and characters got you into comics?
It's funny. Again, it happens at different points through your life. So you discover okay, as a kid, it was all Marvel.
Right. For sure.
We had Mad Magazine I loved, but I didn't ever want to draw Mad Magazine.
Right.
It was Marvel. It was superhero stuff. It was Conan. It was it's weird how things come around too. I was a big Star Wars generation completely. I was 8 when it came out. Somehow I read the novel, although I've read the first few pages since and thought, how did I get past then? But I did, and I loved it. And so when that came out, I subscribed to what I didn't even realize was a reprint comic. It was a weekly English reprint.
Right.
It was coming out of, I don't even know if it would have been Marvel UK then, but the equivalent of. And they would repackage lots of things, like the Hulk would be Rampage, and they were all black and white, so I had no idea American comics were color generally, except for So there was a period where comics were black and white. Star Wars Weekly was fantastic, and it was like an anthology. So you'd have you'd have sort of 10 pages of the Star Wars comic, because I guess what they'd do is take the monthly and then chop it up into 4.
Right.
And then they would put backup stories from other things in there. So the backup stories had things like John Byrne and Claremont's astonishing Star-Lord story.
Oh, wow.
Which was fantastic. And they would also have Jim Starlin's Adam Warlock. And there was a Bill Sienkiewicz Star-Lord story too, where he had this lion-headed guy that was done in sort of washers and Killraven and things like that. And he also had short little horror stories by like Gene Colan and things that were almost EC, more sort of, I'm not sure where they came from, but they were like from an earlier period.
Right.
And so I was in that comic with the reprint and all of the stuff in the background, I was getting this incredible mix of influences. It turned out that the guy who was picking those stories was Paul Neary, who was later my editor-in-chief when I went and worked with him doing Death's Head many, many years later. So he'd been inadvertently responsible for introducing me to those other characters. And later on, when I worked with him, he took that even further and introduced me to a lot more of the EC material that he knew about, and a lot more of the, the sort of, he got me really into the deep dive of Al Williamson and way beyond that, and, Hal Foster and all of that kind of stuff. So he became sort of a mentor of old classic American comics and things that I hadn't seen. So yeah, Star Wars to start with. And then as I got older, I discovered Heavy Metal magazine.
And I knew it. Yeah.
Of course. And 2000 AD came out as well. And that was groundbreaking too. And that had a weird mix of like mid-Atlantic style, which I think is what a lot of us Brits have. You can see the European and you can see the American and you can see the sort of mid-Atlantic of 2000 AD. Actually, Grant Morrison, just quickly, when we were talking about doing the Green Lantern, he said what it was like. He said, the Green Lantern is like American comics, band dessinée, European comics, and English comics all got together and had a threesome, and this is the impossible offspring of that union.
That sounds about right.
I love that. I mean, you've already talked about it a bit, but that Green Lantern series, to be like, it wasn't off on its own little label, or it wasn't like a collection thing that would just come out later, like Earth One. To be like the Green Lantern series and be that wide open, and it's funny because I feel like Morrison kind of has waves of how much they're pushing things too, where sometimes it's like a little bit more restrained ground level and sometimes it's real out there stuff. But for Green Lantern and having just this ring that could do anything, it was I was just so impressed that book was allowed to be what it was. I think is where I'm going with this. It's just
yeah. Well, it's funny how things like that work out. Bill Sienkiewicz actually said to me, because I asked him back in the day about how do you get on a book that would enable you to really spread your wings, and he was quite specific about it. And again, this was a comic I found that randomly in a store one day, and it blew my mind. And it was the Hit It Moon Knight issue where he really became Bill Sienkiewicz for the first time, and it blew my teenage mind wide open. It's just like, this is the most amazing comic I've ever seen. The style behind it, everything about it was fantastic. And he basically said, well, and again, Jim Starlin said similar things too, is that you need to have a title that isn't their top title.
You're right.
And you've built the trust on it, so you're just consistently going, and then when no one's looking, go wide.
That's awesome.
I love that. That's incredible.
Oh, I love that.
And in a way, we kind of did, but I think as well as with Grant is where it's been more mainstream. That's basically not been because Grant has been mainstream. It's because the people he's working with are maybe a little less sort of out there than he is in terms of like his reaching for creative opportunities.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I just got so lucky on that. And I think that one of the things as well was that we said, okay, there's Green Lanterns for everything. You know, there's Green Lanterns for sound. There's Green Lanterns for, for light waves and for any medium you can think of. So maybe there's Green Lanterns for comics too. So let's make it a journey through the medium of comics as well as time and space. And so we kind of really took that literally after a while and sort of going, okay, we'll start really in a very traditional mainstream approach, something that is jumping off from the John Broome period, sort of stylistically quite traditional approach. Mm-hmm. And then, when we end, it will be almost a Green Lantern version of Arkham Asylum.
Yeah, I mean, God, I mean, especially near the end of season 2 there, I'm thinking just specifically of like the Hector Hammond stuff and that like that pink helmet, that candy pink, like, oh God, yeah, it does.
The work with like gradient and stuff like that.
Yeah,
oh my God.
Yeah, what a wild book.
We are very lucky to we're in the multiverse where the two of them got to make that book.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
that's incredible.
It was a joy to me, and I again, all of those things were like, can we really do this? And when I tried it out with the first issue, they let me color, and that went well. And that was the one where that was issue 7 where I had that crazy idea of saying, okay, if it's all inside the ring, maybe I can use the logo as sort of lockups for the panels. And I didn't know if it was going to work because it seemed like a ridiculous ask. And when you actually look at the logo, the shape is so impossible. In terms of just making it clear storytelling, it seemed like, oh no, that's a stupid idea. But I pushed it, and it did work, and people seemed to really like it.
It's incredible.
I liked it so much, I actually brought it with me just for reference, because that single issue, like that. I mean, I was enjoying the book anyway, but that single issue, I was like, I kind of had that moment where I was like, I think I'm going to be thinking about this for a very long time.
The color work in
from
that
the concept to the panel layouts, like you were talking, to the color work, the line work, all of it. I was just like, oh my God, I don't think I'm going to forget about this.
As somebody who like works in a creative field, it's like to look at stuff like that, I'm just like, God, that is like, I wish I could do something like that. Yeah, it's amazing.
I was so pleased.
Not to fanboy out too hard.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you liked it. It was funny too, because even with the coloring, I said, look, I got this crazy idea. I like the idea of it coming from an ultraviolet background and then with a green glow. So every page I laid down a solid ultraviolet and then worked out of that into a green light, because it made it sort of had a weird Tron-like quality.
Yeah.
And they had to take that all the way up to the top to see if that was going to work, because they're so sort of keen on, like, it has to be pure green, it has to be pure red, it has to be, very specific. But they let us do it, and I'm so glad they did.
Like to bring color theory into comics, like that. Fuck, that's awesome. So cool. Oh man. I also like the idea that that Grant Morrison's also like, I wonder if they're gonna let me do this, and I'm just like, does he? I mean, bonkers shit that guy's done.
At this point, you'd think they put you on the book then.
Yeah, he's so well liked, and he and Dan Didio are really good friends. And it was funny because also Grant had said, "I'm done with DC. I'm not doing any more. I haven't got time. I'm full time on the TV, and I really appreciate it." And Dan was saying, "Yeah, but if you're going to do Green Lantern, how would you do it?" And Grant said, "Well," and he just went on this big pitch and basically pitched himself into it. So,
that's smart.
Amazing.
That's a great idea. All right, let's go to the next question, which means that we're leaving Twitter and heading on over to our Discord.
Oh, yeah. Doc Squad plays guitar.
We have to do the stupid things that we set up in our podcast in front of people we actually respect.
We have to do it even when we respect the guests.
Look. Thank God we respect so few of them. Well, of course, the first question comes from the one and only, the man who helped us get here. It's Bruno.
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 Who asks, Batman Reptilian was originally slated to be for the great late Steve Dillon. Can you talk about the process of joining a book later on?
Yeah, absolutely. So Steve, I knew for a very long time, and Garth and I were all very good friends. I mean, lots of us from that era, we're all contemporaries, and we were all in 2000 AD at the same time. He was one of the first people I met when I moved to London, and at one of the conventions, and he actually lived just around the corner from me then in Finsbury Park. So I knew Steve really well, and he became like a big brother to loads of us. And often me, Garth, and Steve would get together in New York, either after a convention, and go for beers, and and more beers and more beers. And he just became a really good friend. We were both at Garth's stag weekend on this island just off the north of Ireland. Complete, like there's 70 people that live on this island and one pub that doesn't shut. So we had history, and Steve, obviously, as is known, had his health had been failing, but he was coming back, and his work was looking really strong. Garth wanted to give him a shot at something that would basically help him get back in the swing of everything, and it would earn him a bit of money, get him back into the driving seat, which is typical Garth. He's very sort of generous like that. And so that was going to happen, and sadly we lost Steve, which was a huge blow to all of us. And it was amazing, actually. His memorial, I flew over from California from that just for a couple of days, and Garth was over from New York. We all had, it was nice because it was nice that the old group, a lot of us who that used to always be together and had not for many years, were all together there. But it was also very sad because he wasn't. So basically, what then happened was there was this script. And Marie Javins, who's also an old friend of the group of us, who has known Garth forever. She was even at my wife's hen night in New York. So we go back along. This was like 98. So we've known Marie a long time. And she said, look, we want to keep this in the family. And, and Garth was like, absolutely, give it Liam. And I thought about it. And I was just talking to Garth, and he was just saying, you know what Steve would say? He'd say, don't worry about it. He said, you should be ashamed to waste it. Just do it with my blessing and do it your way. Wow. And as soon as Garth sort of said that, I was like, absolutely, that's true.
Yeah.
And it's pretty much what I put in my little forward at the beginning. And it does feel like he's over my shoulder, sort of sniggering and going, yeah, nice one, Liam.
Yeah. Wow.
He's a great guy. Miss him a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just crazy to be like, oh, my friend Garth. It's like, Garth Ennis, you mean? You mean talking about Garth Ennis? Yeah, it's just Liam Sharp, Garth Ennis hanging out. It's fine. Steve Dillon, all you guys are friends. It's fine. It's totally normal.
I do kind of love, the thing that Liam was talking about earlier, I love the idea of like, that Marvel UK bullpen or these groups working on 2000 AD and stuff like that. I mean, not to get too far off track, but, do you feel like, I assume that culture is mostly gone now, right? Like there's so many more, I feel like creators working from further and further afield and things like that. Like it must be mostly remote, if not entirely now. Is that, am I wrong? Is that a misperception?
No, I think you're probably right. I don't have a sense of it. It's definitely something I miss.
Yeah.
And I miss that all over the place. I miss that at San Diego Comic-Con. It used to be that there would be like two locations where everyone would get together, and you knew if you went there, you'd know everybody there.
Right.
And the last probably, 7 or 8 years I've been, I can wander around 4 or 5 of the hotels or to, even a few of the bars and not find anybody I recognize.
Right.
Which is really, really weird and different.
Yeah.
Back in the day, if you wanted to work in comics in England, you had to start at 2000 AD. If you wanted to go to 2000 AD, you had to go to the office, you had to turn up and show your work.
Right.
And then there was the Society of Strip Illustrators, which later changed to the Comic Creators Guild for some. I think Strip Illustrators, it was yes. Need I say more? So that was a monthly meet. So you'd go there, and there'd be people like Neil Gaiman there. I went with Don Lawrence. There'd be all sorts of well-known people. Andy Lanning I first met him there. We ended up getting a studio together in London. So there was very much a community. I came up from Eastbourne. I moved into London. Was more accessible then. It's the crazy thing. I was just saying this to my wife the other day. It's like I'm at the peak of my career, and I could not afford the studio I had in London in Upper Street in Islington now that I had then. It's like completely crazy. That's how much it's become impossible now.
Yeah.
But we had a great studio there, and there would be there was one pub. It's called the Valiant Trooper, and that was like a monthly meetup. It was completely unofficial, but we'd go to, and people would get the train from all over the country just to meet in this pub.
Right.
And there'd be John Higgins, and there'd be me, and you'd be all those people I was talking about. You never knew who was going to turn up, and people would bring their portfolios and show their art, and generally drink too much and stagger home at the end of the night. But there was a lovely sense of community that grew out of that, absolutely. And I think when we went to there used to be the UCAC convention, which is the UK comic art convention. Actually, I'll never forget, Andy Lanning did a Sleaze Brothers poster for that, and it was the poster was a UCAC. He said, nope, it must have been me then.
That's awesome.
That's really good. I like that a lot.
Yeah, I mean, it was great, and we'd have a little green room, and everyone. I remember, when Karen Berger came over for the first time from Vertigo. It was such a buzz, it was crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And Will Eisner was there one year, and
wow,
it was amazing times. Wow. And America was a world away. The idea you could ever go to an American convention was. You never imagined you ever would,
right?
And the idea that you'd actually end up living here was even more bizarre and out there. So it just shows you how old we are. It's crazy.
Oh yeah, life's just the clock's turning over and over. Let's just derail the rest of the podcast and talk about how old we all are.
Richard, next question.
No.
God.
All right, let's go to the next question. The next question comes from We've Only Just Dan who asks, what are your favorite non-comic artist influences? Ooh. What are good non-comic artists for aspiring comic artists to check out?
Great question. My first love.
I don't like art, actually.
And it's funny because it's obvious. You can see it through many other artists' influence. But Michelangelo, of course, he was the first figurative artist that I just went, this is amazing. He drew superheroes back then. You look at the Sistine Chapel. It's a comic of the Bible with everyone as superheroes.
Yeah,
it is. Mm-hmm. And the David just captivated me. The Moses, all of the Michelangelo stuff is just mind-blowingly brilliant, and you can see it in Buscema and lots of other artists. But then I was a big fan of the pre-Raphaelites, Burne Jones in particular, that decorative approach, who I later found out was a big influence on Barry Smith. Mm-hmm. So who else are there? I mean, lots of those. There's a lovely watercolor artist called William Russell Flint, who sort of came out. It was very popular again in the sort of slightly post pre-Raphaelite era, early last century. Very, very gorgeous watercolor pictures, very romantic, and they were considered romantic at the time. There are lots of sort of gypsy. You can't even use that word now, but they were. Peasant ladies looking very beautiful, with washing their legs or topless for reasons unknown.
I think I could think of a few reasons. Yeah.
But in the Victorian era, it was very much in that sort of slightly racy, and people like Alan Lee is a huge favorite. He did a book called Fairies back in the day with him, and I'm blanking on his cohort, who was also another. Let me try and see if I can find it on the shelf now, because the pair of them did the Fairies book, but the other one went on and did the Dark Crystal designs and everything, which is absolutely amazing. And I should remember his name without even thinking about it, but I'm blanking. If it comes to me, I'll mention it later on. But both of them were amazing. Alan Lee's. I've got another book of Alan Lee's called it's about wealth mythology. It's called the Mabinogian. It's like impossible to pronounce. But it's all classic sort of romantic mythology from the Celtic era.
Brave and the Bold, it would have been really helpful. Yeah.
Well, and the paintings that are in the Brave and the Bold, there's an issue 4. They're very much sort of inspired by actually both William Russell Flint and Alan Lee inspired those paintings. So they're big for me. But then there's other people, of course, Frazetta. How can you not include him?
Do you often find that you're referring to like classic, like arts or like art books when you're trying to like get into a story or a piece?
It's interesting. So sometimes yes, and sometimes no. It's like if I'm going to do a barbarian piece, I almost have to pointedly not look at Frazetta because he's so overwhelmingly Frazetta that, and I have you probably noticed I absorb aspects of other people's art.
It's hard
like that character out of Doctor Who, the Absorb-a-Lot or something.
Love it.
It's like if I'm looking at it, it's going to come out on the page. And so if I'm trying to do a barbarian piece or something like Conan, I will try not to look at Frazetta, but also be channeling an aspect of it or a sense of it.
Right.
Weirdly, I might look at Frazetta if I'm looking at a romantic moment. I'm more likely to think about his stuff from the romance comics.
Right.
I love the way he put shadows on faces and the way he would draw clothing and the folds, and it's just so sort of lively and such a light, delicate touch. It's really stunning. Yeah. So I actually like Frazetta's comics at least as much of it as his paintings.
Right.
But there's other people too. There's a great science fiction painter called Jim Burns, who's very he's won like more Hugo and Nebula awards than any other illustrator of book covers. I actually met him on his 60th birthday when I was launching my first novel, God Killers, back in 2008 or 2007, and he was a lovely chap. I saw he was going to be there, and I just happened to see it was birthday, and he hadn't told anyone, so I sort of snuck up and said, "Happy birthday!" and he came to sign it. An amazing book by Harry Harrison. It was written by Harry Harrison, who's a great comic science fiction writer. Not completely comic, but he did a series called The Stainless Steel Rat that was really big back in the 70s and early 80s. And he wrote this book called Planet Story, which Jim Burns painted.
Right.
And it's amazing. It's very funny. It's completely, you never get away with it now. The characters, the main female character he describes her twin dirigibles being set free, and her name is Styrene Foam.
Right.
But if you can get past that, the artwork is spectacular.
Sure. Yeah.
And it is very funny read as well.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, I think
I could go on for ages with artists.
I mean, that's good. I mean, we appreciate it. I think like, so I work in graphic design in the marketing world. And typically like one of my favorite things to do is like when you get into a project and it gives you the freedom to be able to sort of expand a bit, depending on what the sort of client is and what sort of the industry that they're working within or what they're trying to achieve from like a communication standpoint. One of my favorite things to do is like to try to like take like an old piece of design or something that I had seen from the past and find a way to like modernize it. I think like that's one of my favorite things to do, right? Like you go through like an old like book of signage or like artwork, and then you go like, I like that. Now, how can I do that in a new way? And I think
I totally get it. I totally, yes, I do the same.
yeah, it's the best. It's one of the best things, especially if, like just from your own standpoint, where it's just like, oh, I want to do like a Bauhaus thing, but I want to do it for like a modern way, and it's like it's such a like self-satisfying thing that it's like maybe nobody will know that, but it's like when I look at it, I go, I know what I was doing there, or like when you see someone else do it, and you go, oh, I see what your influence was there. That's such an exciting like secret artist talk kind of thing.
That's right. You know, in the Possessed, I put a whole load of sort of Art Nouveau ticks in it all the way through it, which would only be there for people who pick up on it.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I love it. That's amazing. All right, let's go to the next question. Comes from Refrigerator Ninja, who asks, what advice do you have for a beginner artist trying to learn to get better?
You got to concentrate on everything else but the characters as much. You know, you have the worlds have to be as much of a character as the characters.
Right. So, such a DC artist.
Well, it's true. It's so true. I keep thinking that I should do like a tutorial or some sort of thing on this. But basically the idea is, and this is something I learned when I was working with Don Lawrence, who was, you know, not just my friend, but he was a mentor. And this was the guy I was referring to earlier, who I was assistant for. And one of the things, I think I would call it, if I did this thing, if I could ever find the time, I'd call it the corridor. And there's a reason. And it's because I was drawing this page, and it was a corridor, and I basically drew this empty extended box with two characters walking down it. And he came over and stood behind me and just sort of chuckled. And I said, what? And he just said, what the hell is that? I said, well, obviously it's a corridor. He said, what do you mean it's a corridor? I said, oh, it's not a corridor, it's an empty box. He said, where is it going? You know, what's out the other side of that corridor? Right. Where do those two characters come from? Is it in a PlayStation? Is it in like a giant space station? Or is it inside a creature? Why is it made? What's it made of? I can't tell what it's made of. You know, right. It could be made of wood. It could be made of metal. It could be made of plastic. It could be made of stone. It could be made of meat. You know, it could be made of anything.
Right.
Why is it straight? Why isn't there a corner? And you know, all of these things are part of the story. All of them inform it. And they are so important to it. And as soon as you start thinking about that whenever you're drawing a page, everything changes, because then you start thinking, okay, I'm drawing these rocks. What are these rocks? Why do they exist? What, you know, rocks are striated. They have different types of, you know, they're made in different ways. Some are porous. Some of them are not. You know, some are super smooth. Some are rugged, and some are like sand and just you know, very soft. So all of those things become a big part of it. If you're putting plants over that landscape, you're going to be thinking about, okay, there's not just one type of plant in the world. So when you look out across a field, there's hundreds of different plants, even in a small amount of space. So those kinds of things are the kind of things you think about.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And then it's just like, where are they going? Why are they going there? What's the gravity like? Do they need to be walking? They could be, you know, drifting. In which case, do they both have to be the same way up? Does it have to be square? Could it be octagonal? Could it be circular? All of these things. And it will start to tell so much more. And it should be invisible too, because that's the thing. People aren't looking at that, but they pick up on it. You know, you pick up on your environment the same way as when you go into a crowded space, you know it's crowded, not because you're looking around, I'll go, oh my God, there's loads of people here. It must be crowded. It's like, you know, you sense it. So it becomes part of it. So
I'm smiling, Liam, because it's the exact answer I was hoping you would give.
I mean, it's a thing. It's a thing. Actually, the two of us were talking about before you hopped on and before we started recording, because we were looking at some pages from Brave and the Bold, #1.
Yeah.
And even the cover, actually, and just we were going like, look at how many individual leaves there are on this page.
Yeah.
It was just even like the level of detail. And I mean, neither of us are implicated in the actual comics industry. And there's, I think, a moment where it's like, oh my God, this must have taken forever. It's like, it's so rich and so detailed. It's the thing that really brings that book to life. But then we were trying to think of it from the other side. We were like, oh my God, I can't imagine
how long it would take him to do a page.
Yeah.
You know, there's a weird thing though that happens that I found is that you don't have to pencil every branch and every plant. When you've done it a certain amount of time, I can busk that stuff with nothing there.
Right.
You know, I just go straight in with the ink. And it's actually quite helpful, because on days where, you know, it doesn't always flow easily, everyone knows, and there's no sense to it, there's no rhyme or rhythm to it. It's like, you come downstairs, you might be really looking forward to drawing, and you sit down, and for whatever reason, you cannot draw a figure, you can't draw a face, nothing's working, it just looks wrong. And so the nice thing about having things like organic, you know, whether it's foliage or rocks or even something on a much more sci-fi level like a big cityscape, is you can just noodle away for a chunk of time,
right,
and loosen up, you know, and just treat it almost like as a kind of almost a Zen process of just pattern making, you know. Totally. And when you've done it after a certain while, you know, trees and things like that become very sort of, they're nice to do. They're relaxing. They're satisfying, and they look pretty. They always look nice. They always do.
Yeah, they're unruled by like you know what I mean. Like it's whatever feels right and like natural. Yeah. There's a famous quote, and Liam, you may know it or know who said it. I can't remember, and I'll probably bastardize it. But it goes basically like the design's not in the details are the design, and it's the thing that like I've like lived by for basically my entire design career. And the point of it is, it's like it's exactly what you were saying. It's not that the thing you need to focus on is the details, but it's all of those things come together to make the actual thing that you're trying to do, right? Like it's knowing all of that information and having that as part of the process is when you're putting something on paper, that is the design at the end of the day. It's not and I think that's such an important thing. It's like you put all of that detail in there, but that's not the focus, and that's the secondary thing that you look at, and you design it in a way that it's like your eye goes to the thing that's important first, and then it allows you the opportunity to be able to look at everything else. And I think that's an important distinction, but it's like something that I completely agree with.
It's so true. And to that, there was a convention, it was in San Jose actually, and Bernie Wrightson was there, and I was just standing next to this teacher who was talking to him, and he said, you know, I use your art, Bernie, all the time to show my students example of perfect balance between black, white, negative space, and perfect composition. And Bernie's like, thank you very much. And the guy went away, and Bernie turned to me and said, I don't think about any of those things when I do my art. The truth is, it's a weird thing, but I know that, I mean, the reality of this job is that you have to hit every page running. And especially if you're known for your detail, which I am.
Yes.
I don't really have any time to figure it all out in advance or thumbnail. I have to rely on doing a lot of the work, you know, in sort of almost a subconscious way in advance, thinking about the script, thinking about how I'm going to approach it, and then just hit it running, and just go straight in. No thumbnails, no layout, straight onto the page. And what I've found over the years is that when you get it right, it does conform to all of those design points. You know, you'll see the classic. You'll see, you know, whether it's an inverted V or the S shape that comes through, or the eight shape. You know, all of the classic rules of design are in there. and you haven't even thought about it. It's come through, and when it doesn't, it really shows.
Yeah.
Right.
It doesn't work. It doesn't work. You know, and that then you have to crop it and move it around a little, which is the joy of thank God, you know, what we can do with Photoshop and things like that now is you can scan and you can replace where the camera is in the scene and save it a little bit sometimes. But it is amazing that that after a while, after many years of doing it, you do start to build a natural understanding of those things. They just become part of what you do.
Right.
Which is fascinating to me, and I loved the hearing that was very much the case for Bernie.
Yeah, definitely.
That's awesome.
I just assume you do like 24 thumbnails before you do any pages. I just figured that was part of the process.
No, my clone does all of that.
Yeah, exactly. All right, next question comes from the other Ryan, who asks, what is your favorite Liam Sharp variant or regular cover?
Oh, what is your favorite cover
of that you did?
Yeah.
Oh God, that's tough. I don't know if I don't think I've got single favorites of anything. Literally anything.
Except for your children.
Yeah, but I would never tell.
No, but they know.
Yeah, which is my favorite. Yeah. Again, I think I can only answer in different eras.
Yeah.
So like The Brave and the Bold, the first one's my favorite.
Right.
For
that's incredible.
For the Hulk, there's one with the Man Thing on.
Right.
And the Hulk from behind that I still like to this day.
Mm-hmm.
The first Death's Head, people seem to regard that as a little bit of an iconic classic now, which is lovely, and it does stand up. I'm not quite sure why, but it does. There was just something that hit home about that.
Right.
And then recently I did a Catwoman one that sort of harkens back a little bit to Dave McKean with lots of boxes around it. Mm-hmm. That I was really pleased with. But that one as much I like the concept, because the idea is that the serial killer, in my head, he'd done the painting. You know, I was saying to the editor, is there any reason why he wouldn't paint? He's a serial killer. Maybe he's wanting to get inside her head, so he's got all these boxes, and the boxes are all little details from her life and little things that he had found out. And so everything in that piece is like things that he knows about her.
Yeah.
And I just really enjoyed that sort of aspect of it, and it felt like it just felt different. It felt like I hadn't seen a cover like that for a long time.
Before we started recording, Richard, you said that one of your favorites, I can't remember the issue number, but it's the Green Lantern 5 or 6. It's the one with Adam Strange.
Oh yeah,
and Green Lantern.
That it's such a cool cover. Like it's the like callback to like old serials.
It's a total Al Williamson homage of a Flash Gordon piece.
Yes, exactly.
Totally.
Yeah.
I love that. And then the like lettering work, like there's a bit of like what you're getting of like 80s adventure. You're getting a bit of the like with the Dark Zone. It reminds me of that like 90s sci-fi resurgence. You're getting again the like classic serials with the top title. Like it's all of it. I mean, the whole composition. Like there's so many like winks at different eras of sci-fi and adventure comics. And like, oh god, yeah, that's.
I'm also not going to think of the actual issue number, which is my fault. But I'm going almost to the opposite of everything we've been talking about, because it's a relatively white cover, but I like. Oh, here it is. It's Green Lantern Season 2, number 10, and it has Green Lantern and Star Sapphire from Earth 0 and Earth 11 coming together. But there's something about like the symmetry of it, and I love like just seeing the variation of design of their costumes from Earth to Earth, because I'm a real sucker for the multiverse and stuff like that. Which I mean, also this whole series was like, I was like, Cosmic Grail, Earth 15, I'm in.
No, I was really pleased with that one. And initially, it had kind of a soft, like a zoom background of like just colors and soft lines in the background that kind of, so it looked like they were rushing towards each other. But I had that on a layer, and I took it out and looked at it against the white and was just like, I love that on the white. I wonder if I'll get away with it. And they let me, so I was really pleased that they went for it. There was actually a Wonder Woman one with which one of my favorites. That it wasn't a big statement Wonder Woman piece. It was the one with Cheetah on her own, mid transformation, which had a white background too, and I really liked that one. I just felt for her, If you can create a piece that you actually can have some sort of emotional resonance with, then that's that feels good.
Your cheetah, you can there's almost like there's like a pain to that cheetah. I really feel for that cheetah. I love that look.
I really enjoyed drawing her. She was she was a surprise, I sometimes feel, and it's no disrespect to the other artists, because everyone has to approach it in different ways. But I think sometimes people might just see the character design having not seen the comic. And if you see the comic, you see that most of it, that character was actually how she moved, not what she looked like. And that became a big part. I don't know how you would put that across in. You'd have to do like a character sheet with all the different sort of, the poses, because the pain was very much part of it. She was always hunched up. I tried to make her, as cat-like as possible in the way she moved. Predatory, and her ears would be pressed back and not always aggressive, because cats aren't just feral, like things like that. A lion isn't. That's what fools people into getting eaten, isn't it?
Yeah, they're cautious and
exactly. So I think sometimes people have missed slightly that aspect of her. But yeah, I really enjoyed that. I know Greg used to love it. He used to giggle over the phone when he was like, "Oh, that page," just because he's like, "Oh, she's so." He loved it.
That's awesome. I love that.
Insane. All right. Next question comes from Mullet Overlord, who asks, what was the process like for bringing Celtic mythology to the forefront of the DCU in The Brave and the Bold? Also, are there any concepts you wish you had been able to expand on that you couldn't?
That story had been something I'd wanted to do for a very long time. And I'd tried at various points through my career to sort of pitch it just as a comic regarding the Tuatha De Danann and the Tír na Og and all of those characters. Balor of Levi, all of those characters. And Pat Mills had already done a really good job with that material in Slain, but it felt like there was enough room, or Slaunia, as they properly pronounced. Sorry, Bruno, he's those guys. If they're listening in, they're going to want me to say it right. So my wife's father was Irish, and had a big love of Irish mythology, and it's something we shared. We used to talk about it quite a lot. So we'd talk about the Torn and Canunas and Cuchulainn, the great stories of Cuchulainn and all of those myths. And also I had the Jim Fitzpatrick's book, The Silver Arm, which I adored. So I was really steeped in that kind of mythology. I've been steeped in Celtic mythology for a very long time, ever since. So when I was at school, my last 5 years, we used to be able to. It was called Classical Civilizations. Was actually a topic you did it at school as one of your subjects. You could opt to, and I opted to do it. So I had a great love of classical civilization. So I was learning all about the Romans and the Egyptians and the Greeks, most specifically the Greeks, really, than anything else. Mm-hmm. And somewhere along the way, I just thought, I don't know anything about my own mythology, British and Celtic, and the mythology of these isles, and Welsh and Scottish and Irish. And so I started getting very into it and reading everything I could about Merlin and Arthur, and then that expanded, and you would stumble across these books like Jim Fitzpatrick's books, and Lady Gregory books as well, that Jim did the covers for, and you could just go really deep with it. There was so much great stuff to read. So when I came to the end of Wonder Woman, it was the question was like, I'm not ready. I wasn't ready to stop. Greg was burned out. He had a load of other top books on that he was desperate to get to, and he'd just done 24 issues of Wonder Woman in 1 year, because it was every 2 weeks. So he was like, I got to stop this now, otherwise, I'm never going to get back to Magic. I'm not going to get back to all the other books and all the other things he had going on that he cared about, Stumptown, all of those things. But I wasn't ready to stop. I was still like, no, I'm still with her. I don't want to go yet. And so I was talking to the editor, and he said, well, why didn't you pitch a Wonder Woman story? And I thought about it, and I thought, well, I could bring in this Irish mythology. Why not? She's a perfect ambassador. That makes sense. So I gave it and I'd had an idea. Actually, weirdly, it was a Green Lantern idea. Where I took the basis of the idea from was a pitch I'd put in about Batman being taken to another planet because what they needed was a detective, not a cop.
Right.
So Green Lantern takes Batman to a planet to find out what's happened to this alien who's been murdered. And so I basically transposed that idea into Tir na Nog. So I go, what if God's been killed? What's happened here? And it all just fell into place. And amazingly, they went for it. So the process was remarkably easy because I knew my stuff, I suppose. And because the one thing I really knew I wanted to do was bring Canunis into it, because he's just a character that he's much more related to sort of Arthurian mythology, really. And he's Celtic, and he's in France, and he's much more. He's not particularly in the Irish mythology at all. In fact, there's no stories about Canunis. Wow. But people know who he is, and they know what he stood for, and they knew what he was the god of. But he doesn't appear in any mythology, and I really wanted to bring him in somehow. And he became. I mean, he's very much sort of my favorite character, really. Like, yeah. And the whole scene where he's, coitus interruptus.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Him barging in on Diana and Steve Trevor is very funny to me, and being like, "Do you want me to bless this? I can do that for you guys."
Steve's like, "What?" Diana's like, she gets it completely. He's like, wait, what? Fertility?
That's
so nobody ran with that.
Yeah, I will say, I mean, my mom has a lot of like Scottish, Irish, like Celtic heritage, and always loves, reading anything sort of Arthurian, and loves digging into that stuff. She's got very little kind of love or interest for superheroes in that. And I think I mentioned offhand that I was reading like a book with Wonder Woman and Batman and Tir na Nog, and she went, "Wait, what?" Like, I think just the idea of something not Greek and not Thor, as a mythology being used in that way, I think it felt very fresh and interesting and different.
The other thing I really enjoyed doing was playing Confounding Expectations, because traditionally the idea of the fairies is that they were the Tir na Nog, they're the old gods of the old Celtic gods. They get shunted aside as Christianity comes into Ireland, but they get adopted still and kept alive as this concept of the little people under the raths and everything, and under the hummocks and underground. And they become diminished in size. The idea that they become tiny people. And the idea that that's complete propaganda from the Christians, basically saying, they're just little people now, they're nothing anymore. And actually, no, they're still beautiful giants and monsters, they're still they were originally giants, so why not?
Yeah.
They were meant to have come over. Some of the stories like from Africa. It's like amazing where the stone circles were originated from. So it's like to play with that and not have fairies be small, but actually have Batman be tiny.
Yeah, totally.
Fucking awesome. I love that.
Some people hated the fact that Batman couldn't be a badass there and beat people up all the time. But I just thought, I like this. This reduces him to the one thing that he was, which is a detective.
Yeah.
And he does that, and he uses the tools that are there, like the Hagstone, to use that, which is a real thing. You pick up a Hagstone, you look through the hole, and you're going to be able to see through the spells. And I love that. For him, that becomes like the Sherlock Holmes magnifying glass. It becomes a tool.
Yeah, that's true. I love that.
Was there any concepts that you wish you could have expanded more on that you weren't able to?
Well, I think there were so many possibilities off the back of that.
Yeah,
it kind of got sidelined because everything shifted and changed so quickly. At DC there was a whole load of other projects that were going to happen and didn't happen, and it all got sort of lost in the mix a little bit. But there was so many possibilities out the back of it. I thought, okay, you could do a really interesting story which was hinted at about, and it would have been relevant to the time too, because it was like the building of the wall and people saying, okay, we can't let these people come through out of these open portals into our world. So I had all sorts of like other people thinking, oh, let's go into Tir na Nog, and they'll go in there and find a beautiful place and be all happy, build a house. And the next time you see them, they're just skeletons surrounded by, they've gone to sleep and never woken up again because they don't understand the magic of that realm. So and how it works both ways. Then what's it like for the people of Tir na Nog and the particularly the Fomorians, these big ogre-like creatures that have come through, and how they're treated by people in Gotham or wherever else they've come through.
Got all these Fomorians coming over trying to take our jobs.
Right. So there was a lot of potential in a very, very different kind of a story that could have been really, really fun.
That sounds so cool.
Someone picked it up. But then you've also got okay, what was the real story with Balor of the Evil Eye? And then there was other things where I discovered, out of Warlord, even there was a Yellow Eye guy in that. It's like, okay, is there some crossover with? Can I make a Warlord story that ties into Tir na Nog? That I had so many ideas. It got a bit out of hand. There was so much that could have happened.
Sure, yeah.
But honestly, it's hard when. I think if the Green Lantern hadn't come along as an opportunity, and there was no way I was going to miss that, because me and Grant had wanted to work together for years. So if that hadn't have happened, maybe I could have jumped on something sooner and pitched it and maybe got it through. Who knows? Yeah, but sure. I have no regrets. I think that the Brave and the Bold stands really nicely on its own as a 6-issue thing.
Definitely, yeah.
It's satisfying. Yes, there's an open end, but it's still it holds together. It's complete as a story. It's got a top and a tail.
Does that say it's sold as a trade?
Yeah, it's a trade. Yeah,
hell yeah.
You're going online after this? Yeah.
Yes. I'm sold. All right, let's go to the next question. From Butt Fart Butt. Who I love. I mean, I do love this question because I'm curious. Who are your top 3 favorite artists in comics?
Oh man.
Oh boy. In order.
There's zero chance I can answer that, but I can give you more than 3.
Yes, sure.
And quite easily. And again, for all different reasons. I'd say, you got the 2 extremes. Barry Smith, for very obvious reasons, his influence on my work is profound, but also Bill Sienkiewicz, his work is also, his influence on my work is also very profound. Mm-hmm. Trying to find a balance between those 2 things is pretty impossible. I am, of course, a huge Dave McKean. I love Richard Corbin. Incredible, just the colors, the fact that he created worlds that he basically made. He took Maxfield Parrish's paintings and sort of turned them into a comic and a very underground adult comic, but maybe problematic for today. But I still look at it just think,
totally.
The stuff is incredible. The Mobius, impossible to talk about favorite comic artists without talking about Mobius. Mobius for me was the artist that showed me that you could use different approaches. You could do one story in one style and another in a different one the next day. And he obviously had his Blueberry stuff. So I think there's a bit of me that's like Blueberry that's always going to return back to my sort of cleaner, more mainstream style. But then there's also a bit of me that's pure Mobius that wants to bust out and just do, whatever takes my fancy and draw like wild and crazy stuff that is channeling the unconscious. And, I don't know where it's going to go. So there's definitely Mobius. I have to say Philip Drouillet, and probably more important than all of them is my mentor and friend, Don Lawrence, who is just incredible. There's many more. John Buscema, Frazetta, Boris Vallejo, many more. Well, Vallejo is an illustrator, really, but I'm not primarily influenced just by comic guys. For sure, yeah, absolutely. But also, if you weren't mentioned there, it was intentional. Yeah. All right, let's do one last question. All right. Also from Butt Fart Butt. All right. Who asks? This is gonna be a really hard question for you to answer. Okay. But was there ever a moment where you realized that your work had crossed the threshold from being good to being exceptional? Has it? I think so. Yeah.
That's always a tough question to throw at an artist. Yes, I'm sure a lot of artists maybe try not to think of themselves that way. But and
we all have imposter syndrome.
Well, yes, imposter syndrome is rife everywhere. But certainly from my personal taste in comics and stuff I've enjoyed recently, I would definitely categorize like Brave and the Bold and the Green Lantern, if not more of your work in the exceptional category.
And maybe the question really is when was the moment where you were like, oh wow, like I'm a comic book artist, like this is my career and like I'm good at this? I don't know. It's literally something I wrestle with a lot, and good. I'm glad that never goes away. That's good. I'm looking forward to that. I feel like I'm only just beginning to accept the fact that people think I'm good, right? Which might sound crazy, but I think I did a Kickstarter recently, which has been huge, and it's called Encore Gold. It's the art of Liam Sharp, and it went huge, and the feedback and the support and the goodwill and the people who just got behind it, and everyone's just saying there's a couple of things I just don't like the idea of, and I put this largely down to coming from a working class Midland background, which is it's intrinsically humble in its nature. The people just are. That's how Derby is. That's how Derby people are. You don't sell yourself up. You don't big yourself up. You don't. You just don't do that. Right. It's almost, I guess, like a Swedish approach. Liam Sharp's the Bruce Springsteen of the UK. Yeah. Well, it's a Viking thing, it's like, whatever it is. Big Derby's a Viking town, weirdly, but so that maybe there is a Swedish connection. Yeah. But yeah, it's this whole thing about so what I sort of react negatively against is any idea of entitlement. I don't feel I'm entitled to anything. I don't feel entitled to great success. I would love it, of course, but I don't feel entitled to it. Right. The idea of
being proud of something, I find if I say, "Oh, I'm really proud of that," I sort of, it makes me kind of go, "Oh, I should have said proud," because it's like the whole idea of pride before a fall. It's like it's somehow being proud is going to mean that everything's going to go horribly wrong.
Right.
And so I kind of undermine myself. I think it's quite common with artists too. There's a weird thing about it.
Yeah.
Because right at the heart of being, I think this is true of all artists, right at the heart of it is a dichotomy and two things that don't sit together. One is that if you're going to keep improving, you've got to know that you're not great. You've got a lot of space to go. You've got it's not perfect. It's a long, long way for you to get anywhere, and you're never going to be as good as you'd like to be.
Right.
Which in itself is quite a weird thing to accept. But then you've also got to have enough belief in yourself to do it in the first place and put it out.
Right.
And the two things are like completely fighting each other the whole time. It's like, I know this is shit, but I also know it's better than than what most people can do, because I've been doing it every day, for years and years and years. So you have to believe in yourself, and you have to believe a certain amount of the press you get and the support you get to do it. And obviously, I found out over the years that I definitely respond best. I'm so easy to. If you want to be my editor, all you do is just pat me on the back and tell me it's good, and I'll give you something even better the next day. I don't respond to sort of. If you criticize me, I'm going to go, "Oh, I'm shit," and give up. It's like, why am I doing it? Nobody likes my stuff. It's awful. It's ridiculous. So I need to. It's a funny thing just about being a creative. And I know there are some people who are incredibly sort of stoic and everything's water off a duck's back and doesn't bother them at all.
Who are those people? What the hell?
I don't know. I don't know who they are, but they're
they're out there.
They're out there. Well, the amount of people who say, "Don't let it get to you," they're those people that keep telling me that. So,
Don't trust anyone that that feels like they belong somewhere.
Yeah.
You always feel.
That being said, I'm at the top of my game, and I'm never gonna. I'm an unsinkable ship.
Yeah. The exception is that this is an excellent podcast, and it'll never get better.
Yeah, we can never die.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I hope, and I really hope that I can continue to get better. There's a funny thing that happened it's like almost every single issue I did, someone said, "Impossibly, he's got better even on the next issue." And again, he's just up to himself. How can he keep doing this? And I'm going, I'm really not. I don't know.
I mean, I saw that Green Lantern book. I feel that way.
I mean, it does make me think of even the thing that Liam was saying earlier about Bernie Wrightson, right? Where it's like everyone from the outside is looking at it and going like, "Oh my God, he's topping it." But you're probably not even looking at it and thinking like, "Next issue, I'm topping it." You're just doing like, "This is what the issue needs. This is like how we're serving the story. This is what I want to do." And then someone comes along and says, "He did it."
Any idea how terrifying that is?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
It's like, oh my God, what happens the day that I do the issue that's not as good as the one before? And I was like, oh, he's lost it now. That's it. That's the end. It's been 5 great years. This is the downslide. This is the beginning.
That's so funny.
Slow, painful slide that we've all now got to endure.
That's so
if
funny.
you want me to improve as an artist, what you do to me, you go, "That's good, but could you do this?" And then I go, "No, there's no way you could do that. I would have done that if you could do that." And then 2 days I come back later and I've done that, plus it's better. That's how my account managers usually get me to do better work.
That's amazing.
That's how my wife treats me about almost everything. That's not.
Oh, your wife too. No, I'm glad my wife's not the only one.
What it is, and I'm doing a disservice. She's amazing. She's my best supporter and fantastic. But what I mean by that is,
That being said,
my brain goes like, I'll be asked to do something like, I can't possibly do that on top of everything else. And then 5 minutes later, sure, I can do that. Of course I can.
Yeah.
Absolutely. All you were asking me to do was walk over there and shut the door.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's like when I can you fix the light fixture? And I go, I can't possibly do that. And then she goes, all right, I'll call somebody. And I go, well, I can do that. I mean,
I can do that. Yeah. That's what I meant. But it did seem appropriate to the story. So I did her a huge disservice. She's the best thing that ever happened to me in terms of just trust, believing in me and giving me the space to do it, and supporting. You know, the one thing I've realized, and I don't know whether this how true of this for many artists, but I know that if there's too many things between waking up in the morning and my drawing board, there's a point at which I'm just not going to get it done. So I need to get there quite quickly. You know, and she's very good at sort of judging that little moment, whether it's going to be one thing too many and it's all going to fall apart. Right. It's weird how it's a tiny balance. You know, it doesn't seem to really make sense. It's not everything about comics is logical. Not everything about art is logical. It's that whole thing about why some days it all just flows. And you have 2 weeks and it's just falling out. And you're like, this is great. I can do this forever. I finally can do this forever, and it's easy. And then the next day it goes and it's gone for 2 months and you're pulling teeth and agonizing over it. And when you look back, the odd thing is you can't tell the difference between those two states on the page. But it felt some of the time is horrible and some of the time is amazing.
But the quality is always good. So it's like,
absolutely.
Yeah, it's just us painting internally.
Yeah. Well, sometimes the quality is better when it feels agonizing, and you know, sometimes
isn't that the worst?
That's really annoying.
When someone's like, this is the best work you've done, and you're just like, well, but I was really mad when that happened.
Honestly, it's so true. It's so true. Some of the work that I really struggled with was the Gears of War stuff, and I think because it had so much specific reference, and you know, once you've drawn a bloody Lancer, like 3 times is enough. And then every panel, someone's carrying a Lancer, and sometimes you've got 5 Lancers in one panel. You know, it's like good. And those costumes had rivets on the rivets.
That game.
So it was hell sometimes drawing that stuff, but because it was a very specific job about it's got to look like the game. It's got to have that. It's got to be right.
Of course,
I was forced to really sort of focus in on that. And I look back at that now, and that's some of the most consistent, solid work that I've ever done up to that point, you know. And I think that it was, in some ways, it was a precursor to coming back later and doing this stuff for DC. I think it sort of set me up for that. It was a good experience.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Well, that's the end of the questions, but we're not fully done yet. We have a game. It's time to play everyone's favorite game called Can You Guess the Name of the Character based on how someone who does not read comic books can describe that character to us. So, if you don't know how this game works, I send a photo of a DC character to my wife, who does not read comic books. She does not care for them. In fact, she has quite a disdain for them. And she sends back 4 clues describing what she sees. And the doctor and our guests try to guess who we're talking about.
There's no wrong way to play. You can guess as many times as you like. You could wait for more clues, but we'll just try and figure out who this character is.
Are you ready, Liam?
I'll give him my best shot.
Okay. All right. The first of 4 clues. The first is intense shoulder pads.
Oh my God. How many people could that be?
It does feel like it's placing it in an era almost.
Yes. Yeah, it does. But also, you know, is it a UK thing? Because I'm guessing this would not be UK centric specifically. Is it?
No.
Are we allowed cues? So is it clues? Is it more US based?
I don't know. I would say no.
But it's DC characters.
Yes.
So we've at least
DC, yeah.
Yes,
So
it's
that's what I mean. It's not Judge Dredd is basically.
No.
DC based, intense shoulder pads.
Yeah.
Doc, do you want to throw one out?
Oh God, intense shoulder. I mean, Lobo.
No.
Okay.
I'm thinking of what's his name? Darkseid.
Oh, no.
Okay, all right. Well, let's get another clue in there. Let's narrow it down.
All right. Next clue is 2 of 4 here. Black metal band eye makeup.
Black metal band eye makeup. And it's not Lobo.
Yes.
Well, Okay. Black metal man, eye makeup.
Shoulder pads and eye makeup.
And it's also not dark side.
No. I'll give you a clue that's not on here, which is it is a female character.
Okay.
Interesting.
I feel like I'm letting DC down. Sorry, DC.
Oh God, I've had so many just weeks in a row where I don't get this.
Yeah. I'm not sure.
It's like Superman, and you're like, oh, come on.
All right, let's see. It's not like Crazy Jane or something like that.
No.
Intense shoulder pads. God, like
black metal band eye
makeup. This is. I'm not feeling this. I'm letting you down.
No, that's all right. Would you like another? Would you like another clue?
We've got four clues.
We've got two more clues.
Yeah, I'm nowhere.
Okay. Clue number 3. Wrinkly ridge head.
Wrinkly ridge head.
Shoulder pads.
Mm-hmm.
Black metal makeup.
Yeah.
Wrinkly ridge head.
Yes. And it's a lady.
And it's a lady. Ooh.
You know, I'll even throw another one in there just because I was mean with this. This is a Liam Sharp character.
Oh, you got it. Beelzebub.
It is.
Beelzebub. Yeah.
Yes.
Hey.
That's what it is. It's Countess Beelzebub.
Yeah, of course it is. Beelzebub.
There you go.
Damn it.
Beelzebub, yes.
Yeah.
Look at that. Oh.
I'm an idiot.
Oh, I
At
love
least-
that.
At least
That's
I pulled
awesome.
it in right at the end.
I was like, can I get him to not guess his own character? I'm like, that would be so mean.
Yeah. Invite him on, have a nice chat, and then the ultimate humiliation at the end. Yeah.
Start describing a thing that he made. Oh, it's just, it was too rich to not do it.
That's very funny.
That's amazing.
Gosh, Liam, thank you so much for coming on this podcast. You got so much stuff always on the go. Maybe if you could let people know where they can find you online, and maybe if you've got anything to promote that you want to talk about.
Well, I guess the main thing is the Kickstarter books, the Encore. That it's gold, silver is black and white one, which is I've just finished collating. Really, so excited about that one. It's sort of 140-page hardback books. These are, and it's going to be a set of 3. So it's gold, silver, and bronze. They're on Kickstarter. It should be sort of fairly easy to find. Obviously, I'm on Twitter, Liam R. Sharp, on Twitter, because there's somebody else called Liam Sharp, apparently, who already put my name. Damn him.
Liam Sharpie Sharp. That's the important piece. Yeah.
Yeah, the Sharpie thing there. And that's and I'm also Liam R. Sharp on Facebook too, if anyone wants to find me on there. And I guess my website, which we're in the process of slowly getting back up to speed, and we'll eventually have a store on for all of the books and stuff. But it's that's sharpie.net. It's Sharpie with a Y, SHARPY.net. And so it's busy times. I'm crazy busy right now. The 2 back books, I can't believe I'm doing them back to back. It's just insane. But yeah, it's good times. I'm happy to be busy.
Amazing.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for making the time to talk with us, to spend I know it's always uncomfortable for artists to spend time talking about themselves, but we appreciate it. I know our listeners appreciate it. You got a lot.
I love talking.
You've got a lot of Liam Sharp fans here and all over Canada, the US, and across the pond, and all over the world, because a bunch of our listeners voted for this.
Yes.
So
Well, it's lovely to hear, and also thanks to Bruno again for giving me a little nudge.
Yes.
Thank you, Bruno.
We love Bruno. He's great for nudges. But yeah, and also if you want to find us online, we are on all of the social media platforms. We're either Dr. DC or Dr. DC Pod. You can find us on all those places. We have a Patreon you subscribe to, $5 or $7, and you get extra content every week, and you get to be part of a really amazing community and vote on stuff like this.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is really important. Yeah. And if you want even more content from us, we have a whole other podcast where we go through every single episode of the TV show Supernatural. We review all the episodes, and we have some really fun guests. Liam Sharp, we've taken so much of your time. Thank you so much, and we hope you have a great night.
Cheers, gents. Thanks again for having me on. And,
absolutely.
All the best. Take care.
Ciao, ciao.
Thanks, Liam.
Bye.
Bye.
Heroes, they always fight for what is right. Live with danger and adventure, they are men of might.
This was a Brain Freeze podcast.